So first of all, thank you very much for the kind invitation for this very interesting venue, and yeah, it's my goal just to share some of our experiences and ideas around this topic. And I have this title, which is kind of boring, I suppose, but really, what it's all about for me is that I think we have some gaps to close in anatomy, and I think there's various gaps that we need to close. And that's perhaps first about myself. I am an anatomist and also an educationalist working in the University Medical Center Groningen. I have been an anatomist for a long time, so I have lots of first-hand experience on the joys and also the struggles of students when they learn anatomy. And this has also been sort of the inspiration in my journey in sort of the emerging field of learning technology. So let's see if this is. Oh, okay. I have to do this. Oh yeah, fine. Okay, great. So I think there is now this idea that because of the explosion of knowledge, I think there's like a doubling of knowledge every so many days. That we cannot possibly teach all of that knowledge anymore, and so we should train our doctors, our future physicians, and maybe also other healthcare professionals to search for information. And I think there is some truth in that. But on the other hand, creating a doctor search it all instead of a doctor know it all, I don't think that is a good idea. And I also have some reasons, as I also think scientifically grounded reasons to believe that is not the right path. And instead, I think we should think about how to use technology not just to search, but also to build a solid knowledge base for our existing, but also future healthcare professionals. And so already many years ago, this great inspirator told us in a song that you cannot start a fire without a spark. You need a knowledge base if you want to use that metaphor. And really, that knowledge base is going to be very important for students to close their knowledge gap and to create like a unified understanding of certain things. And really, from a knowledge base comes interest. And when you know something, you can become interested to know more. And if you know more, you want to know more again and become more interested. So this is a reinforcing mechanism. And there are some very important benefits of that. First of all, when you at least have a knowledge base, you also have a much better idea of what you don't know. And I think this is one of the, let's say, if you look at quality and safety, it is one of the most important aspects that you can learn, to learn what you don't know. And also for a physician, I think this is very important. The second very important beneficiary effect is that you start to place significance on a topic, to value it more. And I think the structure of the human body is something that we should value. We should find that important as physicians. We should find it important to study. And the third, I think, important benefit is that once you know something, you have a knowledge base, your competence increases. You have more confidence in your skill. And because of that, you will again become more interested in the topic, learn more, have a larger knowledge base still. And so this is a very important reinforcing effect, I think. And I think we should actively work on that with the students. Now, if you look at developments in anatomy contact hours, this is really in conflict with the entire story that I just said, because we get to spend less and less time with our students. And this is just a graph from our local situation where, okay, I agree this is many years ago, but in the 1960s, we still had 400 hours of contact with our students, and we are now down to, I think, a little bit higher than 60 if students attend all of the classes that are offered to them. So that is almost a tenfold decrease. And so in this landscape, in this new educational landscape, we have to still manage this a similar amount of anatomy learning objectives. Students still need to learn the structure of the human body, but I feel that we do not do sufficient. I mean, we don't have sufficient means to support them, and I think their technology becomes very important. Because again, when you let this develop, you come into a vicious cycle, basically, where students don't know, they have insufficient knowledge, and therefore they have low valuation, low competence, and also low awareness of what they don't know. Therefore, their interest in the topic is much lower, and again, this will just add to a low knowledge base, and so this will just lead to a worsening of the situation. So what is the way forward for me, at least? Well, I have two areas that I think require support, and I think that there is probably more, but I will discuss two. First, I think are the anatomy practicals as they happen in the dissection room using human cadavers. I think this is a great simulation model with lots of advantages, realistic anatomy. Anatomical variation can be appreciated really well, which is very important. Students can have a haptic interaction with they can actually feel the anatomy. And I think the learning yield is typically high if done well. On the other hand, it's also difficult for students. It's overwhelming, lots of information, many things to see, and therefore it requires many hours to learn. And apart from that, it's also an expensive resource. So also institutions really need to think about how they use that anatomy practical time or the time in the anatomy lab as wisely and efficiently as possible. So I think students, because I already told you that we have really very limited amount of hours at least in our situation in the dissection room. So I think students really need support to close the gap between what they learn from a book and the more realistic anatomy. And we cannot really offer that sufficiently in our current situation in the dissection room. So our goal with the technology that I'm about to present is really to install a higher perceived competence by aiding or supporting their self-study, their preparation for exams, but also for practicals. And we can also offer formative and summative testing in this environment. So I am involved in the Anatom project. Probably also the reason that I was invited. I was one of the people sort of at the base, sort of at the birth of this idea, because I saw that things were not going right in our institution. And I will just take you to Anatom, and it's still very much under development. But as you can see, what we try to do is to visualize human prosections and to bring these prosections through through the learning management system of the institution to the students. And I think this is great because it offers a way for students to get into the course where they are studying, like an anatomy course, or perhaps in a course where anatomy is integrated in a larger course, and they can actually do exercises with anatomy within that protected environment, and by doing so, be much better prepared for their practicals, or by doing so, basically doing some tests or formative, either formative or summative, and just making many more hours, spending many more hours with specimens, and also thereby sort of increasing their competence. And let me see if I can just demonstrate something for you. So it's clickable, so you can do it both ways. You can just you can click a structure and see what it is, but you can also do it the other way around if you want to, and just select it from a list. So here is the external oblique abdominal muscle. We can see the internal oblique here as well, and in this little window we can see the transverse abdominis muscle. And you can see, I can just hide this. how this is nicely annotated as well. And I can unselect them and select other structures as well. And you can also imagine how this could be very useful for a testing situation. Well, and a second area that I think requires support is anatomy terminology. And because anatomy is also a language. And my experience with students is that they find it very boring and tedious, and it takes a lot of time. And on the other hand, it's necessary. Students need to learn this language. And so one thing we also thought about ways to support that, and thought that a gamified approach would probably be the best way to go, and also a learning algorithm to make learning most efficient. So we designed an app for smartphone and also for tablet, which looks a lot like Duolingo, as you can see. And students can just download the app, put it on their device, and study anatomy. And they get simple questions like this, like axes and planes, and they get immediate sort of feedback on their answer, and they go to the next item, and they can just finish these modules as part of a course. But also, if they like, they can just do it in their own time, just like you do with Duolingo. And we feel that this is a very nice way to support that part of anatomy. So if you're interested watching this, then these are the QR codes to access this. It's freely downloadable. It doesn't cost anything. The only challenge, perhaps for some of you, is that it is currently in Dutch only, but you will at least get the idea. So that is my last slide. I really want to thank you for your attention, even though I cannot see you. But thank you very much, and of course I'm open for questions.
Thank you, Janniko. Very inspiring story. You have a lot of knowledge on this topic. Just one technical thing. We just realized that people, if they want to make use of the chat, that they also have to log in on YouTube. So if you want to ask a question, please log in via the system with your Gmail account. That's an addition. We're trying to fix it, but otherwise that's the way to ask questions. On the other hand, we already got some questions up front for you, Janniko. So there was one specific question from someone who said, can you tell me a bit more about how you implemented the tools that you developed basically with other parties, and how you use them in classes? What's the benefit of it, and specifically about the how?
And so is this about digital technology in general, or
no, not more about Anatom and also the anatomy gym you were talking about, like
yes,
how we apply it. Yeah.
So at the moment, I think we are still very much trying to discover how to implement it best. We have implemented Anatom in a couple of situations, especially in the dissection room itself, showing it before the practical, and then just making it more easy for students to find structures. At the moment, what I showed you, it's a web-based version, but it's not yet ready to be implemented in the learning management system. But as soon as we have that, we really want to couple it to the courses by creating preparatory assignments, for example. So it's still very much work in progress. And so what my story was perhaps more about what we aspire to than about what we are actually already doing. Regarding anatomy gym, we have implemented it in several courses. We cannot make it a mandatory part of the course, but that's also not necessary, I think. We make it available for students. Students download it, and they play, and we recommend modules, and they play them. But many students actually play many more modules. So that's also an interesting thing to see. And the idea there is that we still also have to study the effect of that to see, do they actually remember the anatomical facts in the anatomical terminology better. I think the main challenge is to convince students to use it and to have, let's say, a persuasive story. And I think The coupling to the learning management system is a very important one, because then it becomes an integral part of the course. With Anatomy Gym, the design is slightly different. It is designed as a very low threshold and more like a free time application.
Okay. And what do you think is in general the biggest advantage by applying a technique like Anatome or Anatomy Gym for you as a teacher? What do you see with the students? What is the biggest advantage?
I think the biggest advantage is that they feel supported, and the biggest advantage is that because I think many students are at the moment struggling with anatomy. They don't know where to start, and because they feel lost, some of them at least just don't do anything. And the biggest gain that I see is that we will convince more students to take their anatomy seriously, and by beginning and just by using these attractive digital applications, they can make a start, become more interested, and that will just be a sort of a reinforcing mechanism, we hope. So I think the biggest gain I see there, and in the long run, when we start early convincing our students that there are efficient ways to study anatomy and to pass their tests, and in the process they have a higher anatomy competence, in the long run, I think when we see these students again, when they do the rotations, when they start to train as specialists, we will have a much easier time getting their knowledge base up to the level where it needs to be, because at the moment I think we are also struggling there. And so I also see this as part of a more, let's say, vertical integration of digital technology in education.
Okay, thank you. Two practical questions, I think. There's one question about the Anatome app, if it will be also available for other universities. I think that's the case, Janniko.
It is, yes.
Yeah, and there's one about Anatomy Gym, I assume, because someone just installed the app and it's apparently in Dutch. And the question is, will it become available in other languages?
Yeah. We are working on that, but that's of course a very reasonable question, and I understand that there's very few people in the world that speak Dutch. But it started as a local initiative, but there is definitely a plan to translate it.
Okay, perfect. And another practical one is if Anatome is already available on the market. That's the case, right?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. And I see a question from Matthew Yukstan, and his question is, how do the anatomy practicals look like at the UMCG, and how does Anatome fit into the curriculum?
That's a very good question. So the anatomy practicals that we typically do are so first about our curriculum. I think that's very important. I didn't mention that, but the curriculum is problem based. There's a problem per week, and so anatomy is sometimes part of that week, and so anatomy needs to be integrated with the clinical problem. I think this is typical of many medical schools. The problem that we have, and perhaps that also exists elsewhere, is that there is no logical build-up in anatomy as a consequence, because there's a logical build-up in clinical problems, but not necessarily in anatomy. So we don't have like there is no separate anatomy line or learning, or testing, or I don't think students feel the significance of anatomy at the moment, and that's also because the way of that our curriculum is built. So our practicals are practicals with pro sections, so they are specimens like you have seen that have already been dissected, and we can demonstrate anatomy. Typically, we do not offer dissections to the full group. Then how does Anatome fit to the curriculum? Well, I think it will fit to the curriculum in two ways. First of all, we can support students with their self-regulated studying by offering modules where they can find information more easily, and that will in turn help them during the practicals to deepen their understanding, because I think that is the critical thing that you need to achieve in the practical. You don't need to talk to them about this is the ulna and this is the radius. You really want to talk about deeper, you really want to try to achieve a deeper understanding there, and therefore they need a knowledge base. The second important role I see for Anatom is testing, so an examination. I think both formative and summative examinations, I think Anatom will be an excellent tool for. And I'm old enough to remember the rotation exams that we had, the circuit exams, where we had to go by anatomical specimens, and it would have a pin inside, and you had 1 minute to answer a question. I'm not sure if there's other people in the room that are familiar with that, but that was an excellent way to test anatomy. And I think this can now be done in a virtual way with Anatom. So I see these two roles in the curriculum.
Okay, so basically you started with knowing the unknown. That's something Anatom could help with, that they start realizing, oh, I didn't know this before, and now I can practice it as well.
I think it's critical. I think knowing what you do not know is, I mean, again, I concede that we are in a situation where there's so much knowledge that we do have to look for things. I mean, there's no other way. But to do that well, you need a knowledge base. Okay. I think Anatom could help with that.
Well, final question. I think it's one of your students, Janniko, because
I see him. It's Otis. Hi, Otis.
Saying, when are we going to use it?
Yes, Otis. We are working hard on that.
Okay. Well, I think you should arrange that together, maybe after the webinar. For now, you will come back later on after the second presentation, and we will have a more general discussion with the next speaker. So thank you, Janniko, for your presentation and answering all these questions. And we will not wait any longer, because I'm also very excited that Wolfgang Weninger agreed on also sharing his thoughts on simulation in medical education. Wolfgang, welcome to our webinar. Very pleased to have you here.
Thanks very much. Thanks for the invitation.
Yes, well, I'll give you the floor, and I think you will also share your screen, and you can start now.
Great. So I was asked to present briefly the system in Vienna. So this is the anatomy at the Medical University at Vienna and how we are teaching anatomy. So I have to, let's say a few words about our curriculum. Our curriculum is similar to other curricula, an integrated curriculum where we have, let's say, modules on the one hand. So this is, for example, block 2, block 1. So these are modules, organ-centered, let's say, basically. And then there are line elements which are lasting for a full semester, starting in the first week of the semester and ending in the last week of the semester. So this is basically this basic conception of the curriculum. And we pass 760 students a year, roughly, through this curriculum. The numbers are increasing because the lawmakers and politicians forced the universities to provide more, let's say, access to medicine and to studying medicine. So these 680 students of medicine per year will increase in the next time to 740, 750 in Vienna. So the anatomy itself is integrated in some of the modules. So module 2, so this is the block 2. Here, anatomy is a key part, a key element of the teaching. There is also taught physiology. There's also partly radiology in, and there are some glimpses into clinics in this block. And the main teaching of anatomy is done in the line elements, OM1, OM2, OM3. So these are line elements in the 4th, 5th, and 6th semester. So you see it starts at the beginning of the semester and ends at the end of semester. So students are passing, doing anatomy during this time, one time a week in the afternoons. And of course, there are a lot of elective subjects in human medicine. as well as in dentistry. And in dentistry, there are also modules and line elements, but this is structured slightly differently. It's the same curriculum from the first and second semester. So in the first, second, and also third and fourth semester, students of dentistry have the same curriculum as students of human medicine. So this is basically how it works in Vienna, how it's set up is in Vienna. And teaching anatomy has, in terms of teaching aids and of teaching modalities, let's say 3 pillars. So on the one hand, there are hybrid lectures. Hybrid lectures means that we are doing these lectures in the lecturing hall, but the lecturing hall is only valid for, I think, 340 students. So part of the students are allowed to come to the lecture hall. Parts of the students are attending the same lecture in the meantime in the stream, or have the opportunity to attend it in the stream. And these lectures are recorded for, let's say, looking back into these things later on. Of course, we use demonstrations and so on. So we have a setup established in our lecture hall. The second pillar is, let's say, hybrid and virtual reality and hands-on, in a hands-on way. So virtual reality in a way that there is, let's say, the possibility for each student to use these virtual reality facilities. I will come back to this. And we try to mix it up so that we have a kind of virtual, digital, and physical practice in certain rooms. I will come back to this later on, because I think this is the main part of the interest of this lecture. And the largest pillar is, of course, the hands-on dissection classes. So they are supported digitally and virtually. You have here this pandemic setting, so it's slightly different from the normal setting we are using, but in this, I only have, let's say, only found some photographs of this pandemic setting, so from 2020. What is the dissection class? In the dissection classes, they are part of the line elements OM1, OM2, and OM3, integrated with histology and radiology, but the main body of it is dissection. And it's done with 6 students per body donor. And these students are dissecting for a total of roughly 120 hours by themselves, but are supervised by staff and academic staff and student fellows. So some clinicians coming over, for example, from the surgical department or for orthopedics or from other otolaryngology or whatever, and they're teaching with us, and we have students fellows. So this number contains the majority of these people are student fellows. So in this setting, we are dissecting roughly 120 bodies in parallel in 6 classrooms. Here is one of these classrooms, also in the pandemic setting. So in this setting, we dissected 1 student at 1 body, and they were, let's say, coordinated to use, so that 6 students could use 1 body at different times of dissection. It was a nightmare in organization, but it worked. And during these dissection classes, we have oral exams, which are kind of discussions between the student fellows, the academic fellows, and the staff with the students. So they are constantly asked about what they're doing, what they're preparing, what's the systematics behind, and so on. And the main goal is to learn not only anatomy, but also the variants of anatomical structures. So people have the possibility to use all these 120 bodies for learning and to use the knowledge obtained from the body donors immediately for translating it into, let's say, a patient setting. So we encourage people to translate the knowledge immediately into these, let's say, in vivo setting. Of course, there is this practical and oral exams. So you don't only have oral exams, but also kind of practical ones. So people are forced to constantly evaluate it, how they are dissecting and what they are dissecting and what's the quality of their dissection. And of course, they learn how to use basic instruments and soft skills because they have to work together in groups of things. So we are supporting this dissection, self-determined, let's say, dissection by allowing the students to use a virtual dissection classroom, which is basically a kind of e-learning system only accessible for students. So it's a Moodle course, and this there's a key, and you are only allowed to attend this course if you are a student of the Medical University of Vienna. And then you are free to use these different, let's say, parts, these different windows, which reflect basically these regions which have to be dissected by the students themselves. And each of these boxes contains then videos, and these videos are partly demonstration and slightly partly dissection, or like here, only dissection, how to dissect and how to, let's say, get access to different or to challenging structures, which are not easy to access. And of course, we support them not only by knowledge videos and by how to dissect videos, but also provide them tricks and tips how to arrange the specimens, how to use the instrumentation, the instruments, and so on. And we use this virtual dissection classroom for e-testing, and e-testing means that we do large tests of systematics on the one hand, and on the other hand, we use these videos and drop-in and such modalities for, let's say, forcing people or students to study those videos and then allow them to start with. They only have the permission to start with the section if they pass, let's say, certain questions regarding these settings in the video, demonstrated in the video. So this is the support for the dissection classes, the digital support for the dissection classes. What we recently tried is to put in also some, let's say, large-scale, here's the ventricle preparation, so students dissecting a brain, and what we did is we, let's say, put one of the teachers inside the dissection room, dissection classroom, and this did, let's say, the section of the brain in certain steps, slowly, and after each step, the students could do this themselves, and so on and so forth. So we integrated, let's say, digital parts into the dissection hall itself. And recently, we also started to integrate headsets, virtual reality headsets, into the dissection classrooms, so to allow the students to, let's say, gain access to structures, or gain knowledge about structures which are difficult to are very difficult to dissect in the dissection hall, and allow them to learn this virtually. But this is, as I said, in evaluation because of hygienic and all the other problems which are associated with it. But we recently had one of such an interregio project where we, let's say, dived deeper into this virtual reality settings, and we decided to, let's say, create practical courses, also hands-on courses, let's say, in a kind of manner, so for students to learn structures, anatomical structures, systematics of anatomical structures by using three-dimensional virtual models, and diving through them and let's say, dissecting them virtually in a very, very rough way, in a kind of self-determined manner using headsets by themselves. So there is the software installed on these headsets. People are working by themselves, have some, let's say, guidelines, what they should look for and what they should find and what they should access, and then they are, let's say, using this. We are using this for learning systematics in block 2, so in model Q2 of this curriculum. So we pass all these roughly 700 students through these settings in this for self-learning with headsets. What we discovered is that there is a kind of cyber sickness for some students. So students don't agree or have problems in using headsets. And for those students, we also have some alternatives. So cyber sickness set, as we know, as we term it. So it's a three-dimensional monitor which allows without glasses and which allows without wearing glasses or other aids to visualize structures, like in this case the skull, three-dimensionally if you're in a certain distance to this monitor. So this is only as an alternative. The regular practical teaching is done with these headsets. And of course, we provide students access to these facilities, to these, let's say, VR facilities for self-studying or for, let's say, improving their knowledge by themselves. So in summary, we have two of these hybrid facilities, as we call them, because they are not only used for these using of headsets and virtual reality, but they are also used for using, for example, bones and plastinates at the same time. And of course, there are PCs there for assisting students to, let's say, learn how to use the headsets, but also to assist them for having, let's say, two-dimensional information, which is not worth to be transported via the virtual reality headsets. And all these facilities, of course, supervised by teaching fellows. So there are in the afternoon certain time slots where students can book in, and then they are, let's say, supervised by teaching fellows who are also responsible for, let's say, handing out and returning these headsets and to, let's say, maintain these facilities. So this is in principle, the setting as we are using it currently. And of course, we want to expand, let's say, evaluate whether there's a possibility to expand the virtual reality possibilities to use, for example, Anatom and to products for optimizing our teaching and to, let's say, increasing also the possibilities that are possible for teaching anatomy. So that's in brief the very brief and very shortly summarized what we are doing in Vienna and how it is organized in Vienna, and I think Anatom fits perfectly in. But we have to explore where it works best. So this is one of these ideas.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Wolfgang. Very insightful for everyone. I think it's amazing how many facilities you have and what you already built with virtual tools. I also learned about cyber sickness, so that's probably something people also should take into account. I think also something we are not aware of, but it happens quite often. There's a very interesting question from someone who says also, like, does it also have an influence on the clinical reasoning of students when you implement these technologies? Like, is it changing?
I don't know. So I think it will have, because we will, let's say there are a lot of projects going on in clinics for using virtual reality, but they are different settings because they are using this for, let's say, simulating emergency cases and such things. But our systems or our virtual possibilities would allow us in principle to, let's say, learn the anatomical basics by the students themselves as soon as they enter clinics, for having, let's say, a kind of remembrance of the basic anatomy.
Okay. And what is the feedback students have provided after attending these VR classes? Can you tell a bit more about that?
So we evaluated, of course, parts of this, and one of the results of the evaluation is that there is, of course, a better for bones, for example, students prefer the physical bones, macerated bones. For other stuff, they for topology of the nerves, for topology of the arteries, they prefer, or they don't have dissection or done dissection themselves at the stage of evaluation, but they all agree that it is very profitable for them to learn the systematics of anatomy by using, and partly the topology, by using virtual models. So this is the outcome roughly of the evaluation. So they agreed with it, and they found it a fantastic possibility, let's say.
So there is an improvement of learning outcomes. Can we put it that way? Okay.
Definitely. So it depends on the stage of education. So we have in Vienna a very deep anatomy and education, let's say. But in the first years are profiting immensely from it. And I think this is also true for some topics for 4th, 5th, and 6th years. So if you combine it, I think it is a perfect opportunity.
Okay. I know there are some people in the room that haven't done anything yet with VR or other technology. What would be a good first step to take if you want to implement technology tooling in your curriculum?
I think you have to, let's say, think about where it fits best to implement it, and what you want to achieve with it. Because if you want, whether you want to switch totally in certain areas of education, or whether you just use it as an add-on. So I think this is the important thing, is to know, to have some ideas where to use it. And on the other hand, I think it's important to think about whether you want to use it in a kind of hands-on setting, so that each student can handle the virtual tools by him or herself. Or whether you want to use it as a teaching aid, where you do, let's say, small classrooms in a VR setting, which is possible. Or whether you want to just allow them to use some, let's say, additional teaching aids by having, as Yannick mentioned, these annotations in the digital atlases, let's say. So it entirely depends on these questions: what system you want to use, and how do you want to develop, and what money you need, and what infrastructure you need. And therefore, I think this is the vital first question for a curriculum.
Okay. There's another question from Matthew. He asked, which platform do you use for the VR classes, and what were some early setbacks in its implementation?
So we use a software we let's say, purchased in the scope of this in vitro project together with the Comenius University in Bratislava. And the software does the job for the things we are using it for. What we discovered very quickly is that there are, of course, some drawbacks in each software, and it is necessary to increase the quality, let's say, by trying to find ways of, let's say, customizing it for the needs at your university, and to, let's say, learn how to use those parts which are fitting very well for your needs and your demands. So this is, but the software is for these things, it's okay. For other things, we wouldn't, let's say, use it for for certain questions or for certain aids, because this.
Okay, thank you. I would like to invite Janniko also to come back to the stage again. There he is. Because now it's also time to have a more general discussion together. And what comes to mind for myself is that what we see, there is a lot of globalization in the world. Like we have people from all around the world working in hospitals. But I do see in Austria, we have a different way of teaching anatomy than in the Medical Center of Groningen. How do you think technology can kind of bring these different worlds more together? Because in the end, we probably expect as a consumer, between brackets, that everyone kind of has the same knowledge base, I would assume. Who wants to elaborate on that?
Maybe I can throw in something first, and then maybe Wolfgang can add, from his perspective. I think there is possibly two aspects to this. First is the let's say the under-resourced settings that exist in the world, unfortunately, where I think technology can play a huge role in supporting the quality of teaching. I'm not saying that there's probably very good quality teachers there, but I think technology could do a really important job there. The second thing that technology could do is I think it could bring institutions closer together, create a platform for institutions to collaborate and perhaps even exchange teaching. The differences between Vienna and Groningen, from the perspective of the significance of anatomy in the curriculum, are obviously very large, and I think we have seen that from Wolfgang's presentation. I became very jealous, Wolfgang, when I saw your presentation. but I mean, maybe this would also allow you to, or allow us to, not only Wolfgang and myself, but I mean institutions to team up, in a way. So these are the two, and to exchange perhaps best practices more easily. And so these are the two things that I see.
Wolfgang, any additions?
No, I fully agree. I think it's on the one hand, it's a kind of a question of resources and of the commitment of the university, to be honest, to support such a very financially or a costly system. And this is, of course, not possible in each setting and in each country for several reasons. And I think this idea to exchange teaching and to, let's say, work together and come together via technology, I think this is, Janniko, is a very great idea. And I think this is also one of these things where Anatom, for example, comes in. So this is definitely a good opportunity for us to learn about how to assist our teaching modalities, and on the other hand, on how to assist teaching modalities in other countries, and for example, in Groningen, how we can learn from each other, and that's I think the key element.
And do you also foresee any challenges in when we go more virtual, stimulated education?
Yes, to be honest, yes. So, but if I start, I think the most dangerous part is that people lose very quickly the idea of variations, because the variability is very hard to, let's say, assess in a virtual system, currently at least. Mm-hmm. Because variation is the norm situation, let's say. So there is no such things that this is always so. It's always a kind of percentage, and therefore I think it's very important to have these ideas about variations, and one has to, in the current systems, neglect it somehow, because of course constraints due to financial and to access and so on. But I think this would be very interesting and very necessary to have in later times. So, for example, in our videos we are using for supporting the, let's say, practical parts, we are always using, for example, if you use bones, 5 or 6 different bones to demonstrate the variations on these different bone settings, let's say. And so I think this is vital and has to be expanded into the virtual world. I don't know how Janniko thinks about in Groningen, but I think this is one of the most...
No, I agree. And perhaps there's another dimension. The challenges that I see is that there is something about social interaction, being in a group physically, and I think especially in a dissection room, perhaps, that is irreplaceable. And I think that whatever Wolfgang and I were discussing, it was never the intention to suggest that we would ever replace our dissection room activities. But I think in general, there is sometimes the perception that this type of interaction can be replaced somehow by digital technology. I am very skeptical about that. So not only in the field of anatomy, but I think in general there is something, and it's not tangible, but there is something about human interaction that is very important for learning. So there is a challenge, I think, in developing a digital technology, and as another challenge, I feel that the sort of the overwhelming or the very great impulse that currently is to invest in digital technology also creates a lot of initiatives. And I think for students and for users, it can sometimes be very overwhelming to have all these initiatives being thrown at them, different platforms. So I think we also really need to think about persuasive design, about how to make this user-friendly. And I think this is the fact that we can do everything technologically, it doesn't mean that we should do it. So this is also, I think, a very important concern for the future.
Okay. You are both at the forefront of innovation, I would say. On the other hand, we all know that in healthcare and also education, a lot of people also prefer to teach more traditional methods. Maybe they want to be perhaps more comfortable in their work in a traditional manner. How do you motivate and involve your team members? Because they also have to make that shift. Janniko?
So, tough question. So in my specific situation, I think I have been very much involved in a number of projects, but also I have learned that sometimes I've been running ahead of the troops a little bit too far, and so it's very important to keep people involved, and you cannot expect from all of your colleagues to have the same interests as you. So it's important to give everyone time and to involve them as well. And I think if you do that, you can be successful. But it's never something you can enforce. So the way I do it, just to give you a concrete answer, is that I gave people time. The people that needed time, I gave them time to get used to this. And now you see that people are getting used, and also, as the story that I told, they become more interested as a result.
And how is that in Vienna, Wolfgang?
Yeah, so we have a very good team and very interested and engaged team, let's say, of physicians, because in Austria we have the system that there is a physician, let's say. So it's a medical subject in anatomy, and you can make a residency, and afterwards you can be a medical doctor for anatomy. And this is, let's say, we have currently a few people doing this residency, and they are very engaged, and we try to, so the older ones, let's say, try to assist them, try to take them, of course, into the section classes, into the lectures, try to, let's say, transport our knowledge. But on the other hand, what we have to on the other hand, allow them to develop something by themselves. So, for example, this virtual system was very intensely done by Andreas, and he is responsible for it. So it's his charge. And Caroline is doing the same in these things. And so we let's say, try to give the responsibility out of the hand of which also saves time for me, to be honest. On the other hand, I think this is necessary because this allows people to, let's say, set their own ideas and transport their knowledge and learn a lot of by doing it by themselves. So the same as doing learning anatomy by dissection, it's necessary, I think, to learn by doing it in terms of giving lectures, supervising dissection classes, and so on.
Yeah, also to add to that, we also now have a staff member who's sort of dedicated to further developing anatomy gym, for example. So we have that kind of practice as well, and one of the staff members will also get involved with Anatom more. But because I fully agree, you cannot do it by yourself; it's impossible. Exactly. Unless a day would have more hours, but it doesn't. So it is important, very important, to be able to rely on your team.
Okay. Well, we're almost heading to the end of this webinar. Janniko, if there is one final advice you would like to give to the people in the room, what would it be regarding unlocking the opportunity of using technologies in anatomy education?
Well, okay, so I am actually quite a conservative person. I am normally not so keen on trying new things, but I found the journey of trying to discover something like this and developing it most thrilling and inspiring. So even if you don't do it for the students, do it for yourself.
Wolfgang?
Yeah, so I think I have to repeat what I told you, that I think it's very necessary to think first about where to use it, how to use it best, and which people you want to involve into it, and which, let's say, companies you want to approach. These are the basics, I think.
Okay. Well, thank you both for telling more about how you implement technology in your curriculum. Thanks a lot, everyone. Also, thank you for attending and listening to this webinar and also putting in your questions. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks again for attending. You will receive a link with the webinar, which is recorded, and that's something you can also share with your colleagues. For now, thank you and hope to see you next time.